Hey everyone, welcome to Rodha All India Open Mock Analysis. Mock khatm ho chuka hai. The usual feedback we have got so far is VARC was tough, some passages were very difficult, some options were very close, questions interpret karne mein dikkat aa rahi thi, so on and so forth. So of course, in the detailed videos here, we would provide you the interpretation, we would look at option elimination, we would look at question selection, we would also look at RC selection. तो सारी यूजुअल चीजें करेंगे. Of course, do let us know in the comment box how you found the mock. I will take up the RCs one by one. I would take you through the RCs completely, thoroughly. One more thing, I would try to show you that even during the actual paper, if you come across a passage which is very unfamiliar, the concept is not well known, you face problem with the language, then also you can manage to interpret it to the extent that you can solve questions. See, you do not have to understand every single line, every single word, but if you get the broad gist, the broad idea, main idea of the passage, you can solve questions. You have to be just very good with the interpretation and elimination part. And if you can manage both, I think you can manage a pretty decent percentile for sure. So I'll take up the RCs one by one and I would give you a thorough interpretation part. So stay with me and do let us know in the comment box how you thought VARC section especially was. Let's begin. Welcome to this first RC of Rodha All India Open Mock. Now, this RC particularly was quite shocking for a lot of students. बहुत सारे students ने बोला, सर इस वाले RC में तो कुछ समझ ही नहीं आया, passage ही समझ नहीं आया, language was difficult, questions were very difficult, options were not that easy. Agreed, it is a shocker, especially language-wise. But remember, everyone, abstract passages, as I keep on saying, see, abstract passages are written by people who deal with ideas, right? Philosophers वगैरह लिखते हैं. So what they do basically is that philosophers don't have a lot of things to say. They have those 1, 2, 3 basic ideas. So what they basically do is they want to come across as intellectuals. So what they do is they basically sit down with their friends, party करते हैं, and then they write 500-word articles where the actual point is like probably 20, 30, 40 words, 1 or 2 points. But they have to sound intellectual, so they talk about the same thing, they give a lot of examples, they explain it, they repeat it, और घुमा फिरा के हमारा दिमाग खराब करते हैं RCs में. That's what they do. Trust me, I'll show you that also, right? So, when you're reading an abstract passage, if you can just get the basic idea right, chances are very huge that you'll be able to get right answers also. Even remember, when you're doing a passage, let's say you're writing cat and you're looking at RC section. Within RC section, you would notice that there would be a broad distribution of difficult, moderate and easy passages. If you look at cat in last 3-4 years, you would see one passage is generally on the difficult side, 2 are generally moderate, 1 is easy. Now very clearly you can always say that, but how would I know which one is which? Very clearly there is no shortcut of doing that. You have to just look at the first few lines, figure out whether the language is okay, you are able to figure it out, understand kar pa rahe ho ki nahi. So that feel which comes from a lot of practice you have to use and choose very wisely, right? So that's one. Second, even within the RC, you would notice within the RC also there is very clear-cut pattern of one question being very difficult, at least 2 being very moderate, and the fourth one being pretty easy. So again, can I figure out questions by looking at them? Students पूछते हैं, can I figure it out by looking at them? You can't, right? The deciding factor should be time. If you can't spot the correct answer within the first 60 seconds, probably it's a difficult question. Mark it for review, come back to it later. Can you spot an easy question? You can't, right? Some questions would be difficult. If you can't figure it out in the first 60 seconds, just let it go. Some questions would be there where you would make a mistake and you would not even figure it out. गलती भी हो जाएगी, पता भी नहीं चलेगा. That is what is the nature of VARC. That's the nature of the beast. आप कुछ नहीं कर सकते. So don't worry about it. Now one more thing. Students ask me questions like, should I look at the questions first? Especially since 2020-21 onwards, majority of the questions have become critical reasoning based. Even if you look at the questions, it won't help. which of the following is true, which of the following is a conclusion, which of the following if true will weaken the argument, strengthen the argument. देख भी लोगे तो क्या हो जाएगा? What's the point of looking at them? Time waste मत करो. Right? I hope you get the point. Now, when you read any such passage, the focus should be on understanding the main idea. As I said earlier, philosophers don't have a lot to say. So what they do is they talk about very basic things, sometimes nonsensical things, and you'd be like, क्या कर रहा है ये? Why is he writing all this? But then that's the nature of philosophical passages. पढ़ लेते हैं, कुछ कर नहीं सकते. So let's read this one. Let's try to figure out क्या कह रहा है बंदा. Once we get the gist of the main ideas, we can probably do the questions also. So of course I would analyze the questions. Options भी देखेंगे, how to eliminate, things like that. So let's begin here. So it starts by saying, how could gaining knowledge amount to anything other than discovering what was already there? It starts with a question. How could gaining knowledge amount to anything other than discovering what was already there? दो friends बैठे हैं, Plato and Socrates, right? शाम के 8 बजे के बाद बैठे हैं, probably डिस्कस कर रहे हैं. भाई एक बात बता, how could gaining knowledge amount to anything other than discovering what was already there? If we gain knowledge about something, are we not discovering what is already there? Suppose I discover that sun is in the center and earth goes around it. भाई अर्थ सन का चक्कर लगा रहा है. If I have this knowledge, am I not discovering what is already there? ये तो पता ही है ना. This is something which is already there. I mean, I'm not discovering, I'm not inventing anything. I'm just discovering what is already there. So when I have knowledge of something, I am just discovering something that exists. So when I say water has 2 molecules of this, 1 molecule of that, it is already there. So knowledge is basically knowing about something which already exists. Socrates says, हाँ भाई, point तो है, you are right. Another question. How could the truth of a statement or a theory be anything but its correspondence to facts that were fixed before we started investigating them? As I keep on saying, everyone, philosophers हैं, trip पे रहते हैं, they keep on repeating. The second line is actually repeating the first line. It is saying the exact same thing, that how could the truth of this statement be anything than the fact itself? So when I say, the Delhi is the capital of India, it's basically a fact that is already there. I'm just making a statement about it. Socrates is like, हाँ, सही है भाई, correct. Some philosophers have argued that despite widespread intuition to the contrary, knowledge is not merely a matter of representation. Representation means saying it, but also of construction, and that truth cannot be completely detached from human needs and interest. So some philosophers say that knowledge is not a matter of representation. Knowledge is not a matter of saying it. So if I say the gravity pulls us down with 9.8 meter per second square speed, it is just not a fact that I have to state or I state. It is also construction, means we also create it. So some philosophers say that we just don't state it, a fact. We don't just state a fact, we also create it. And that truth cannot be completely detached from human needs and interest. John Dewey, for example, argued that the object of knowledge is the product of inquiry and not something that exists independently of that inquiry. Now look at this line, everyone. It says, you know what, there was somebody called John Dewey, और John Dewey ने कमाल की बात बोली. John Dewey said, you know what, when we say that earth goes around the sun, we are not stating a fact which exists. Somehow, by saying that earth goes around the sun, we are making earth go around sun. हम ये नहीं कह रहे अर्थ सन का चक्कर लगाता है. By saying, by talking about it, we are making earth go around the sun. Now imagine the level of these philosopher guys. By talking about it, by thinking about it, we are making a change, we are impacting the outcome. But this can't be right. होश आ गया. सोक्रेटिस कहता है बट यार ये थोड़ी हो सकता है. गोवा में डब्लू पेड़ के नीचे करोड़ों रुपए रखे हैं. नॉलेज इज दैट द मनी इज देयर अंडर अ ट्री इन गोवा. वी गो एंड डिस्कवर इट. दैट्स नॉलेज. This guy, John Dewey, says, no. By thinking about, the way we think about it, the way we investigate it, that can change the money or change the location of the money that is under that tree. It can impact all this. Socrates is like, ये ज़्यादा हो गया. This can't be right. After all, scientists discovered DNA, distant planets and gravity. They did not create them. पैसे के बारे में सोचा तो पैसा वहां पे आ गया. ऐसे थोड़ी होता है. नाउ इट लुक्स लाइक हाँ यार सेंस बोल रहा है. करेक्ट. फैक्ट्स आर फैक्ट्स. एनी अदर व्यू सीम्स डिजास्ट्रस. एंड फ्रॉम द वेग असर्शन दैट वी ऑल क्रिएट आवर ओन ट्रूथ टू द नीचियन claim that its interpretation all the way down, without a shared target that we all aim at getting right, rational discussion is no longer possible. So what were these philosophers getting at exactly? Now the author is saying, but by talking about, we create the object of discovery, we create the money under the tree by thinking about it. Ye philosophers, what were they talking about? Author is asking. You can also imagine Plato is asking Socrates. So Plato and Socrates are talking. They're like, Plato is like, but these guys were talking about creating that money by thinking about it. What was it? Let's discuss it. तो और discussion करते हैं. The realist view. I like realists. They are like, ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता है. So the realist view, which sees inquiry as a process of revelation and knowledge as a representation of facts. Do not worry about these kind of wordings. If you get confused, just don't read them, because they are philosophical way of writing things. So what is this line saying? It says realists think that inquiry is a process of revelation. Inquiry is a way through which you discover things, and knowledge is a representation of facts. And realists believe in it. Correct. What is inquiry? Inquiry is the process through which you discover something. What is knowledge? Knowledge is facts. Perfect. Then it gives you an example. Remember, very few points. So goal. They'll talk about the same thing 10 times and then they'll give you a lot of examples, details, explanations. Think of a murder investigation. To be sure, the investigator might need a creative imagination in thinking about possible solutions and way of looking for evidence. But their knowledge of the killer's identity does not involve any creation on their part. Obviously, ACP Pradyumn in CID looking for the murderer. Does the thinking of ACP Pradyumn impact the identity? जिसने मर्डर किया उसने मर्डर किया है ना. ACP Pradyumn की इमेजिनेशन से, थिंकिंग से will the identity of the murderer change? What kind of a bakwas is this? Right? So realists are very clear. Realists are saying, what nonsense is this? On the contrary, someone killed the victim and nothing that the investigators do during their inquiries could alter that fact. Knowledge consists in having the right beliefs about the fact based on the right evidence. Perfect. These kind of examples are useful for philosophers. They are simple, familiar, they generate powerful intuition. But to आना ही था, because we have to talk about the same thing 10 times. Precisely because of their simplicity, they can be misleading. Not all inquiries are like with whodunit investigations. In fact, if we want to know what knowledge is, we should also look at more complex cases in which the object of investigation itself is articulated, represented, only as inquiry progresses, depending on the type of inquiry. So now it says, fine, realists are saying all right. Realists सब सही बोल रहे हैं. My way of inquiry does not impact the identity of the murderer. But the author says, but we should not look at every inquiry as a whodunit investigation, right? If we look at more complex cases in which the investigation's reason itself is represented as, or articulated means it comes out, revealed only as inquiry progresses. What is the author saying here? Not very clear. Depending on the type of inquiry we examine, we might find that it is more appropriate to talk of articulation than representation, creation rather than revelation. Acha. So author is now saying, okay, realists said that the inquiry does not change the identity of the killer. But the author is now saying, but wait. Sometimes, the way you inquire can create. Please मान लो मेरी बात. कभी कभी ना ACP Pradyum, the way he inquires, can create rather than only discover. So you're like, अच्छा, okay, fine, let's accept. बोल रहे हो, मान ही लेते हैं. इतने बड़े फिलोसफर हो, कुछ तो आता ही होगा तुम्हें. Some inquiries are indeed like whodunit. Now it's again talking about some not so important point. We start with specific questions, and these questions come with predetermined set of possible answers. Our goal is to land on the correct answer. Sometimes we succeed, but nothing we actually do during our investigation determines what the correct answer is. So it's saying the inquiry does not make a difference. Again, it's coming back to the same point. Inquiry does not make a difference. The killer remains the killer. This is the tragedy of the judicial system. Innocent lives are ruined while the real culprits get away with murder. Some cold cases remain cold. To a certain extent, many of our scientific inquiries could be understood in this way. The definite questions, with their space of possible answers, presupposes an object of investigation that is already well defined. The correct solution to a murder case might be surprising, but it is nothing that a clever novelist could not imagine. So what is the author saying at last? Author is saying that, in some cases, inquiry can create the outcome. So if I look at the flow of ideas so far, what have we done? What have we read? So let's look at the main points in simple language. Plato and Socrates sitting at night talking to each other, right? After a little bit of having some good time. So Plato says, you know what, Socrates, some philosophers think that when we learn something new, we are not just finding out what's already there, but also creating knowledge. So Socrates is like, acha. And then Plato says, you know what, others argue that knowledge is about discovering facts that exist independently, like, DNA, gravity. Socrates is like, okay. And then Plato says, you know what, investigations seem to show that facts are fixed and our job is to figure them out, not create them. And then says, but you know what, there are some philosophers who do not believe like that. They are like, not all investigations are this simple. Sometimes what we are investigating only becomes clear as we learn more. So in these cases, we might be creating knowledge as much as discovering it. Socrates is like, okay, ऐसा भी होता है. So if I am trying to find out the money hidden under the tree in Goa, my process of discovering it can create the knowledge, create the outcome, create the result. Plato is like, may not sound correct, but that's how it is. Socrates is like, all right, क्या कर सकते हैं, वैसा है तो है. चलो, let's look at the questions. तो questions देख लेते हैं. Now question 1 says, which of the following statements, if true? So it's a critical reasoning question. Please believe all options are true. यहाँ पे गलती क्या नहीं करना है. Please don't go and start looking for these pieces of information in the passage, which a lot of students do. If true means all of these are true, please don't try to check them up from the passage. Which of the following statements, if true, would most undermine, attack the author's argument that the complexity of some inquiries requires a shift from representation to articulation? Representation basically means saying as it is. Articulation means revealing something, right? Or finding something new, कह लो. So representation is stating as it is. Articulation is revealing something new, saying something new. So we have to undermine what? We have to undermine the argument that the complexity of some inquiries require a change from stating as it is to revealing new things or finding new things. We have to basically say it is not right. ये गलत है. Right? So we need to shift from finding this to this. Now use your common sense, everyone. Even if this question looks very complex, we have to attack an argument that says shift from A to B. So what is the counter argument, everyone? Counter argument is हम नहीं बदलेंगे, हम change नहीं होंगे, we will not shift. There is no need to shift. There is no way a shift is a requirement here. नहीं चाहिए. Which option is saying that? ढूंढो, मिल जाएगा, that's it. Right? Let's find out. Even in complex scientific theories, it is talking about complexity. Foundational observations often remain unchanged despite new discoveries. Now, if this is true, that even in complex scientific theories, foundational observations remain the same, then is there a requirement for changing from A to B? No, this is the correct answer directly. Now, wait, you would say, but look at the other options, they are so confusing. Okay, remember, these questions can become confusing if you do not have a shadow answer. हमेशा try करो shadow answer बनाने का. What is shadow answer? Shadow answer is before you go to the choices, you should have a very good idea in your head what can be a good answer. I need an option that says even in complexity or complex inquiries, you don't have to change. Now look at option 2. Philosophical problems that appear definitively solved may be reopened by future generations with new perspective. Is it about complexity? Is it about complex scientific problems, complex theories? No, it's talking about philosophical problems. Can it attack the argument? Very unlikely. Artistic creation and scientific inquiry ultimately rely on different modes of knowledge acquisition. It's talking about how you acquire knowledge. Knowledge acquisition का shifting not required के साथ क्या link है? There is no link whatsoever. Historical investigations that uncover new evidence may lead to refinement of existing understanding rather than fundamental alteration. Historical investigations can lead to newer understanding. Does it say in complex cases there is no need for change? कुछ भी बोला ऐसा. Even if it is true, does it even touch the main argument? No. So what's the correct answer? हो गया. First is the correct answer. Now please understand, everyone, this is important. हमें क्या लगता है, if the language of the question is hard, it is bound to be hard. No, just try to just rip it open, see what is the author basically asking. Once you get it, try to create an answer, especially if it's a weakening and argument question. आप आराम से कर लोगे, इतना मुश्किल नहीं रहता है. So relatively a tough passage, but it is quite doable. Right? Let's look at the next question. Now, as I keep on saying, if you see a question which you are not able to really figure out how to approach, try to simplify it. Try to think in terms of X and Y, A and B. कहने का मतलब, if you can't really figure it out, try to see the very basic level of interpretation. For example, this question says, the author's comparison of X and Y primarily serves to. So question is asking, the author's comparison of X and Y serves what purpose? Now, if you have read the passage and if you have understood even the basic things, you would be able to focus on keywords in the options and eliminate choices. बस इतना करना है. Remember, you have to find the right answer after elimination. You don't have to find the perfect answer. Author ने X and Y को compare किया क्या बताने को? Primarily to say what? Option 1 says establish a foundational framework for understanding the knowledge-based, epistemological means knowledge-based, challenges inherent in both domains. Just go back and think. Did the author talk about challenges anywhere in the passage? Author ने बोला क्या कि मैं X और Y को compare कर रहा हूँ because I want to talk about challenges. Challenges are like, the difficulties. Nowhere. Now let's look at option 2. Highlight the role of empirical. Empirical means based on observation. based on tests. Evidence in constructing knowledge across diverse fields of inquiry. Now, why did the author compare X with Y? To highlight the role of evidence based on observation, tests, etc. in constructing knowledge across diverse fields. This makes sense that yes, the author compares these two because the author wants to highlight the role of evidence in both the cases. In inquiry, evidence can be a good answer. The author compares X and Y to illustrate the tension between the search for objective truth. Objective truth means impersonal truth. It's a truth that is not touched by, is not bound by anything. And the influence of human subjectivity. Subjectivity is personal opinion. कहाँ जा रहे हैं हम? Where did the author talk about all this tension between this and that? We can eliminate. Differentiate. Differentiate is a good word. If you compare X with Y, you can probably, you're doing it for differentiating. You're comparing a car with an elephant. You are trying to find differences. Good choice. Between investigative processes that primarily involve deduction. Deduction means from all you can talk about some. If all murderers use weapons to murder and you have somebody in your mind who can be a murderer, you will think, where is the murder weapon? Because all murderers use weapon, no? So this person also must have a weapon. This is a deductive reasoning. So is the author using X and Y comparison to talk about, to differentiate between investigative processes that primarily involve deduction and those that rely heavily on induction? Induction means if one person uses a weapon, every killer will use a weapon. This is also part of investigation, but primarily involve heavily on induction. The passage does not talk about this in terms of difference between X and Y or comparison between X and Y. तो ये भी eliminate कर सकते हैं और correct answer very clearly second हो जाता है. The point I'm making, everyone, is that try to compare the options in terms of the simplest possible form. जितना overthink करेंगे उतने ज़्यादा wrong answers के chances बढ़ जाते हैं. Moving on. Now look at this question, the primary objective of the passage. Now this is a very, very expected question, everyone. Main idea, main conclusion, main objective, primary objective, central idea. You get like back bhar bhar ke. Now whenever you are doing these kind of questions, especially remember, when you look at the first word in every option, be very careful. These words are known as operative word, right? Operative words are the words which have a very huge impact on the entire option, because they are the main verbs and they generally tell you what the passage is doing. So you have to first ask yourself, is the passage deconstructing? Deconstructing basically means taking something and opening every part of it. So passage deconstruct कर रहा है. Is the passage synthesizing? Synthesize means taking two things and trying to create something new, right? We can be pretty sure the author does not try to do that anywhere. Author is not synthesizing. Author is talking about two ways of looking at things. Synthesize तो बिल्कुल ही नहीं कर रहा. Synthesizer कोई नहीं बजा रहा है यहाँ पे. Illuminate means highlight, हो सकता है. Undermine, challenge, weaken. Is the author doing that anywhere? No. हटा इसको. Option 1 and 3 are left. Now let's read. Deconstruct the prevailing epistemological knowledge related model by challenging. Author does not challenge anything anywhere, especially, right? It's underlying or basic assumptions. No, the author does not weaken anything anywhere. The author does not say this is wrong, that is wrong. Author simply says one way of looking at it is this, second way is this, that's it. तो highlight तो कर सकता है but challenge नहीं कर रहा. So the correct answer would be illuminate the complexities involved in knowledge acquisition by examining diverse case studies, obviously. Remember everyone, this was an easy question relatively. Always judge yourself first on the basis of easy questions. Easy questions नहीं छूटने चाहिए. Difficult गलत हो जाए चलता है, easy नहीं छूटना चाहिए. ये easy question था, right? Moving on. Now this question again is about murder investigation. This guy is very clearly obsessed with murder investigation. पीछे पड़ गया हाथ धो के. The author's discussion of a murder investigation primarily serves to. Author ने murder investigation को discuss किया that plays which role is the question. Murder investigation का primary role क्या था in the passage? We already know the answer. The author talked about murder investigation to talk about the fact that the murderer is already there, right? So suppose there is a victim, and this victim has been killed by a murderer. Okay, so this person has been killed by Gabbar Singh. Now, how we investigate does not change the fact that the killer is Gabbar Singh. ACP प्रद्युम्न कैसे इन्वेस्टिगेट करते हैं कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता किलर कौन है. किलर इज फिक्स्ड, करेक्ट. But the author does say that how we try to inquire, how we discover who the killer is, has a bearing on the killer, on the ultimate accused, and that is why the author talks about some accused not getting caught and some cases not getting solved. So how we inquire does impact who ultimately is caught as the killer, but who is the killer is already there. No, that truth will not change. Author was talking about this. So why did the author talk about murder investigation? To primarily tell us that how we inquire, the method we take, that ultimately does not change the truth, but it has some impact on the outcome. Outcome पे थोड़ा असर तो आता है इसका. Let's look at the choices. Option 1 says exemplify the challenges. Again, did the author talk about difficulty anywhere inherent in distinguishing between empirical, observation based evidence and theoretical construct? No, the author does not talk about it. Especially murder investigation, he talked about only in terms of how we investigate, and who is the murderer ultimately. How we investigate has some impact on it, right? So he used the murder case to talk about the way we inquire, not challenges, difficulties and all. क्या बकवास है ये? Illuminate, highlight the interplay, connection between deductive is from all we find out about some, and inductive, from one we find out about all. So these are methods of investigation. Reasoning in investigative process. Yes, the author talks about murder investigation to talk about all this only, that there is a connection between the way you investigate. From all we talk about some, from some we talk about all. So not very hard, makes sense. Underscore, highlight the limitations of relying only on positivist. Positivist is an approach, okay, in philosophy. It basically means that you basically believe in empirical evidence. Positivist approach basically means that जो ऑब्जर्वेशन या टेस्ट के थ्रू साबित हो सकता है हम उसे ही मानते हैं. So whatever can be tested or verified, we believe only that knowledge. So it says to underscore, highlight the limitations of relying only on empirical evidence. Did the author talk about any limitations when he was talking about murder investigation? No. Out. To contrast the methods employed in exploratory versus confirmatory research models. Did the author touch on this anywhere in the entire passage? Exploratory, confirmatory. You can eliminate this also. So elimination wise it was very doable question. But yes, this was a typical example of Vinod कैसे अंग्रेजी बोल के घुमा रहा है. Definitely some of you might have gotten confused also, but if you had paid attention to the keywords, challenges, limitations, the question is doable. All I'm saying is, remember, this was a hard passage overall, but still doable. If you pay attention, read critically, look at those tiny things, तो आप कोशिश करते रहोगे तो ये सारे passages doable हो जाते हैं. मुश्किल ज़रूर है, but impossible नहीं है, कर सकते हैं, right? All right, so we'll move on to the next one now.